Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into a really profound shift in how we approach self-development. We're looking at this fascinating journey of moving away from constantly trying to fix ourselves, and instead moving toward fully accepting ourselves. I mean, if you've ever felt just completely exhausted by the endless pursuit of self-improvement, the concepts we're going to unpack today might actually change how you view your entire mind.
So let me hit you with a tough question right off the bat. When you wake up in the morning, do you feel like a whole human being? Or do you kind of feel like a never-ending to-do list of personal defects that desperately need to be fixed? The source material we're exploring today challenges us to confront this exact reality, because so many of us are just walking around operating under the assumption that there is something fundamentally wrong with us that we just need to get rid of.
And the source material actually points out a massive trap here. We so often treat ourselves like a busted-up car sitting in a mechanic's garage needing repairs. We'll look at a lazy part of ourselves, or maybe a really judgmental voice in our head, and think, whoa, how did this get into the engine? I need to trash it. But the true goal? It isn't about treating yourself like a broken machine at all. It's about integrating all the parts of a complete human being.
To put this into perspective, let's look at the author's own journey. It literally took him 16 agonizing years of hardcore self-development to finally figure this out. Starting when he was just 19, he hired one-on-one coaches, read every single book he possibly could get his hands on, and went all in on self-improvement. But he eventually realized this endless cycle of fixing himself was actually just a war against himself. Because despite all that work, those so-called negative parts of him didn't actually disappear. They just got a little quieter.
And here is the real kicker. Sure, self-improvement can make you successful. It can absolutely make your business grow and make you happier on the surface. But that doesn't mean you're actually healing. The author had this realization that he wasn't really healing because he was always trying to fix something. Sometimes what we call self-development is literally just self-attack wearing a disguise.
This leads us straight into what we can call the self-development trap. It's this quiet, insidious message floating around the self-help industry. It's the underlying idea that you simply aren't good enough until you stop being lazy or until you stop being judgmental or selfish. We tell ourselves, once I become more giving, then I'll be worthy. And it basically sets up this impossible condition where your self-worth is always just over the horizon, completely out of reach.
But here's where things get really fascinating, and honestly, a bit paradoxical. Going to war with the parts of yourself you can't stand? It actually feeds them the exact energy they need to survive. When we actively fight our selfish side or our lazy side, we are pouring our energy directly into that very thing.
Think of it kind of like a garden. Fighting your internal traits is exactly like watering a flower. If you fight your short temper or your ego, your aggressive attention acts just like water, feeding the exact thing you are desperately trying to kill off. The author noted that no matter how hard he tried to just destroy his short temper or his judgment, those traits kept popping up. The big realization? You literally can't erase these parts of yourself.
Right, so if we can't just delete them, what on earth are we supposed to do? Well, what if we completely flip our perspective for a second? What if these highly annoying, stubborn traits aren't actually defects at all, but are rather deeply misunderstood tools? What if the labels of good or bad are just made up, and these are actually mechanisms designed to help us? If we rethink this, it builds a totally new vocabulary for our internal world. We start redefining our so-called toxic traits into highly practical, protective mechanisms. Take laziness. We always label it bad, right? But what if it's actually just your body demanding rest? Or maybe you're just not lit up by your daily routine and it's a sign you need a career change. Or look at selfishness, almost always labeled negative. But if you happen to be a chronic people pleaser with zero boundaries, selfishness is exactly the tool you need to learn to protect your own energy.
Let's dive into a real-world example from the source material about the ego. When the author was writing a book, he obsessively put it through 16 rounds of edits. He had to stop and ask himself why he was pushing so incredibly hard. And sure, part of it was a pure desire to impact people and change lives. But playing devil's advocate, he realized there was this highly competitive side driving him too. He wanted to win. He wanted it to be a massive bestseller and make a lot of money.
And through that, he had this massive realization. His ego wasn't evil. It was actually a team member that helped make the book significantly better. That drive to be number one pushed him to refine his work over and over again. This means you don't fire your ego, you just manage its stage time. Sometimes your ego needs the microphone to fire you up and push you towards excellence. And sometimes, well, it's been talking way too long and you just need to pull it off the stage.
Now, apply that exact same logic to judgment.
When your inner judge pops up while you're just driving down the road screaming at bad drivers, totally unhelpful, and frankly, it just ruins your commute. But when you're evaluating a risky financial investment or deciding who you can actually trust in a new business relationship, that exact same judgment is an absolutely critical survival tool. Having a high level of judgment is incredibly valuable. You just don't want it screaming into the microphone all the time.
So instead of constantly fighting yourself, how do we actually use this? The source outlines 3 pretty clear steps to integrate these parts so they stop unconsciously running the show. First, you just acknowledge the trait is actually there to protect you. Second, you understand its origin, because often these traits were built way back in childhood to make you feel safe or in control. And third, you mentally place it in your internal tool belt, keeping it ready to be pulled out and sharpened only when you actually need it.
Which brings us to the symphony of integration, orchestrating your internal parts. Think of your mind as this giant, beautiful symphony. To actually make music, you absolutely need all of your parts. Your fears, your ego, your laziness, your judgment. You need the brass, the percussion, and the woodwinds. But obviously, you don't want the French horn playing over everyone else all the time. Your job isn't to kick the French horn player out of the band. Your job is to become the conductor. You have to be the one who knows exactly when that instrument gets a solo and when you need to tell it to quiet down.
As we wrap this up, the biggest takeaway here is that real healing doesn't just magically start with forced self-love. I mean, you can't just jump straight to loving the parts of you that you've hated for years. It starts with laying down your weapons and simply accepting that your traits exist and that they're ultimately there to help you. When you stop fighting and start accepting, the internal battle ends and life gets a whole lot lighter.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today. The next time you catch yourself saying, "Ugh, I really need to get rid of this part of me," just pause. Instead of attacking your perceived flaws, what would happen if you simply asked them how they are trying to keep you safe? How could you use that part of yourself as a tool rather than an enemy? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this helps you conduct your own internal symphony a little bit better today.